Okay, we're continuing back again. Halacha still talking about Chalav Stam. So last time we spoke about, let's go back 2 times ago. We spoke about the Pri Chadash and Chasam Sofer, who have a question about if you have milk from a country where there's no concern that anybody would use treif milk. Okay? But in that case, did Chazal make their gzeira that you have to have only Chalav Yisrael? The Pri Chadash was Mekel, and he said even that in those kind of countries, if the person has either there's no treif cows around or he has no incentive to use the treif milk, then you don't need Chalav Yisrael. And then last time we spoke about Rav Moshe's first 2 teshuvas, in which he says that even the Chasam Sofer, who's machmer about that question, would be Mekel here in the United States, because even though you do need Chalav Yisrael means you need a certain kind of a birur, you need a certain kind of a proof that the milk is coming from a cow. Having an anan sahadi, if there are other ways to make determinations even without Aiden watching the thing, and the government oversight helps us have that anan sahadi, helps us be confident that it's kosher milk, and that anan sahadi, this is in English we say the rules of evidence. This is in the Bezdin, this would qualify. These kind of proofs would qualify for a Bezdin for lots of other dinim, nothing to do with Chalav Yisrael, lots of other dinim, even much more serious than Chalav Yisrael. And therefore, we could be Mekel, and the milk that we have, it came up with a new term. Rav Moshe didn't make this term, but that we call Chalav Stam is considered good enough. Okay, you could
yes. Just, I don't remember. Did you ever, is Chalav
Stam?
Israel.
Yeah.
Is the issue just treif in the terms of a non-kosher animal, or is it also because of animals that have women that would?
No, because the only concern they might aid in milk from a non-kosher animal, from a species that's not kosher. Okay, so now as soon as these Rav Moshe really wrote 3 teshuvas, the 3 main teshuvas are all printed right after each other in the first Chelik of Year there. So the first 2 teshuvas are about this, what we spoke about the last time. But the teshuvas are written within like a month of the next one. Okay, as soon as he wrote the second teshuvah, it's like obvious, it's right away. The person wrote back. He said to him, you got a question. Okay, nothing about the chiddush Rav Moshe said. He says, I don't understand. He says, you're telling me because the government watches what the farmers are doing, therefore we have an anan sahadi that the milk is kosher. So the person said, it was like a deal breaker. He says, what are you talking about? He says, the government doesn't go to the farms. Okay, the government oversight, the USDA, whoever's in charge of it, they only deal with the dairies. They don't go to farms. So how can you tell me that because the government is watching, therefore we have an anan sahadi that we're getting kosher milk, and the government is not watching? That's not who they watch. Well, they don't do that. So, the question, obviously, he's not even talking, you don't see the shaila, but the question obviously came across as like, I'm not going to talk to you about your chiddush. He wasn't questioning Rav Moshe's din that he said, that there's an atzad, but he's like, what are you talking about? They don't visit companies. They don't visit farms. So how can you make it? Okay, so Rav Moshe has the third teshuvah, is to answer this question. The third teshuvah is by far the longest of all the teshuvahs that there is. And what do you say?
On the subject
of the 3, on this subject. No, not the longest by any stretch in the Sefer, but on this subject. And he says, what to me is the biggest chiddush of all. Much more of a chiddush than the first part. The first part, which is the most famous part, which is about it being an anan sahadi, that's much more, if we could use the word, more straightforward and more, treading on regular ground. But Rav Moshe is a big chiddush. And he says like this. When the Chachamim said that a yid has to watch the milking, and you have to have a certain level of knowledge that this is cow's milk and not anybody else's milk, that requirement only starts at the place when the yid begins to take the milk from the non-Jew. When the yid comes to get the milk from the non-Jew, he has to be able to determine that the person he just got it from didn't do any adulterations. Only that person who he's dealing with. So in the Gemara's case, the normal case was there weren't all these layers of marketing to get the milk out. They went over to the guy and said, "You have a cow, give me some milk." So the person you were dealing with was actually the person milking the cow. But really, the requirement is not to go to the person milking the cow. You only have to know that the person who you dealt with, so to speak, the person who you're handling with, he didn't do any adulterations. Okay.
They don't go to a farm, but they say, listen, Mr. Dairy, you only get cow's milk, is that right?
They say it's the dairy, yes.
Mr. Dairy, right?
Yes.
Mr. Farm, they don't kill it. So obviously they're only going to get, they're only going to get from the farm only cow's milk.
Okay, I'm going to say I'm going to talk about what you just said in a minute. But you're back to the question. You're not going to answer. You're answering the question. You say, I don't care that if they go to the farm because I know it anyhow.
Yeah, I understand Ramesh. I don't think Ramesh is Chiddush.
No, Ramesh says, I don't care what happens at the farm.
Right.
Not because they're not Sahadi stretches back. We'll talk about that in a second. He says, I don't care, because even if it would be trace milk, so to speak, even if there's a real chash back over there, I only have to keep, right, the requirement only is that when the Higil Yad Yisrael, when the Yid is when he comes in contact with it, that person who he's dealing with, that person, he has to be involved that person didn't do any adulteration. What happened before it? Couldn't care less. You're giving your own answer, which we'll talk about in a second, but Ramesh doesn't say it. So,
why does that make any sense?
Why does it make sense? So I'm going to get to that in a second. I'm hopefully going to get to that in a second. Okay, but that's what Ramesh wants to say. Ramesh even thinks about it. Ramesh even considers. He said he's not 100%. He said that maybe if a guy gives a yid milk to work with, and the yid doesn't own it, he doesn't make a technical kinyan. Even that time, he might not need to be Chalav Yisrael at that point. That he talks about.
But that is Chalav Yisrael.
No, he gave him. He may not need to know that the person who he got it from is not. Anyhow, so Ramesh has. It goes on for many pages, and the simplest way to look at this, the simplest, if I can use the word proof to what he's talking about, is that we're going to see later, and that's really we'll talk about that part of it. Is there are dinim that if you have cheese made out of milk from a guy, you may not need, under the right circumstances, you might not need to know that milk was Chalav Yisrael. I'm talking about in Shulchan Aruch. Forget about it nowadays, Chalav Stam. You might not need to know that the milk was made from Chalav Yisrael if that milk was made into cheese. And we're going to have an halacha gimel that if you make milk into butter, you also might not need to know that milk was Chalav Yisrael. Okay, each one of these under special circumstances. So what's going on? How can you eat the butter? Forget about whether it's considered Gvinas Akum. What happened to the Chalav Yisrael part of it? Why is that mutter? So that's the most simplistic look. The simplistic look to say to us that the requirements that it be Chalav Yisrael start when the Yid comes into contact with him. What happened in the earlier stages is not important to him. So the fact that before him when it was milk, it may have been not Chalav Yisrael, doesn't make a difference. When I get it, I'm looking at butter, I'm looking at cheese, or in our case even, I'm looking at milk 12 people down the road. I don't have to care what happened to the earlier people. Something bothering you? Okay. So
the whole
required for you?
Yeah.
The whole point of Chalav Stam is a chashash that they might mix in something up, right? So when you're dealing with cheese already, so since non-kosher milk doesn't weigh curdle, isn't it it's already you're already outside.
You're saying to me that helps me prove way back then.
Say the proof from cheese doesn't weigh curdle.
Not Sahadi.
No, but
because when you already have cheese, so it's pretty clear that was made out of kosher milk.
Okay, so there's really more to what I'm saying. I'm not getting into the gory details, but there are cases where it's even from the milk part, that is not enough of a proof, but yet we're still being mocked of the cheese anyhow. Okay, let's just hold it. Okay, okay. So this Teshuvah that Moshe wrote, if you look at the days of it, okay, you'll see that it was basically impossible. Let me back up a second. If you remember, I told you the person who most directly argues, so to speak, point by point that what Moshe said is the Chilkas Yaakov. Okay? He looks at the first two truths of Moshe. His mind's going point by point. Every raya that Moshe brings, every sorrow that he brings, he's back and forth on each one of the points that he brings. Okay? He's the person that I saw who was the most directly confronting what Moshe said. Not just saying, we only want Chalav Yisrael, just be makbid. He was point by point working on what Moshe said. And he doesn't say a word about this third Teshuvah, this big Kiddush that the Moshe says in the third Teshuvah. And the reason is pretty simple.
There's someone who wrote a whole sefer against Iggeros Moshe.
Could be.
And he writes a lot about that.
Could be, I believe you. Okay. Okay, so the Teshuvah from Chilkas Yaakov was written, if I'm getting the dates right, about 10 days after the third Teshuvah from Moshe was written. Okay.
What was in here?
It was 1954, I believe, 54. So in those days, there were no fax machines and emails. So, for Moshe wrote the Teshuvah on, I think it was days? I don't remember the days already. He wrote it, and 10 days later, by that time, the Chalav Stam had not had time to see what happened. It didn't work so quickly. So he doesn't say a word about it. No, he just never wrote about it, whatever. He wrote the Teshuvah a few days later. Maybe 6 months later, he saw the Teshuvah from Moshe. He didn't have a chance to write it. But I was surprised that we don't see other people, I haven't seen other people who are directly addressing what Moshe said. They're not, this part of what Moshe said. Most people focus on the first two Teshuvahs, the more famous parts, about whether you should be lying on Tzadi, you shouldn't be lying on Tzadi, which we've talked about. But this part, which is that you should say it only has to be when it's Higil Yad Yisrael, that they're not really talking much about. So we can ask our own questions on it, just to help bring out what the Chiddush from Moshe is saying is like this. First is why would I think David started saying this. I guess that's everybody in the room. David started saying this, which was that why would Chazal make a takana that only starts at a certain point? If they're concerned that you're putting in treif milking, why wouldn't they have made the takana to start way back from when it came out of the cow? Doesn't that seem the logical place to start the takana? Why would you come up with such a... Let's believe, Ramesh, that there's such a takana. Why would anybody make something like that? Why would you make a takana that says, make sure it's only cow's milk, but only start from today? Don't care about what happened yesterday. What's the pshat in that? Why would it be like that? Yes.
Maybe it could be because in those times it was impossible for them to go to Yehubitzville to watch them. I'm just saying it wasn't biyadu to do it, and they knew...
No, it's just the opposite. The case in the Gemara is the person went to the guy, got his, and watched him milk the cow. He watched him milk it. That was the normal thing in those days. What we're doing is the unusual, which we have so many layers between us and the cow. So why would they make a takana that says only start from a certain point? So we may have an answer to that. Ramesh is saying that it only starts from the person that I buy it from. When I buy it from the guy, I have to make sure that person didn't mix in any treif milk. If the person he bought it from mixed in treif milk, it's not important to us. So why would they make a takana? Why would you make a takana like that? Why shouldn't I have to keep all the way back? Okay, and second,
Too hard to accomplish.
no, but it's not really. In times the Gemara was not too hard to accomplish. In the case of the Gemara, they bought it from the cow. That's the Gemara's cases. So you're saying they buy it from cows, but under this circumstances they would be making like what would be the reason for that? Okay, and what would happen if we go now? Really, it's going to be next time. We're going to Hashem. I keep saying next time, but Hashem next time we're going to talk about getting Chalav Stam from countries where there's no government oversight. Okay, we don't have. How do we know which countries get it from? But let's pick our country. Okay, we find the country that doesn't qualify. So, would it be true if I walked into the supermarket and I bought a sealed container of milk? Okay, so I know that the store owner didn't put any treif milk into it because it's in a sealed container. Right? It's in a regular, one of our sealed containers. So does that mean I'm allowed to buy it? Because I know that the person I'm buying it from didn't add any milk into it. The guy who he bought it from may have done who knows what he put into the thing. But as long as I know that the guy who I just bought it from, the storekeeper, I walk into the jewel of in the middle of Iraq. Okay, I go into the jewel and I buy a milk there. I know the guy in the store didn't add anything in because it's still sealed shut. But the guy he bought it from may have existed. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Of course, there can't be a chashash that would be true even with the Chum didn't make any kind of role. Of course, if there be the rice of chashash.
Yes,
the Chum wouldn't have to make it.
That's a very good point. That's a good point. No, you're making a good point. We're going to get to that. But so you say, let's say there's no chash like that. So I could walk in, I can go into, I don't know, Zimbabwe, I walk into there, and I walk into the store and I can buy a bottle of milk because the store owner for sure didn't add anything in because it's sealed. I mean, you could tell he didn't add anything in. It came from the dairy like that. Okay, maybe. Now, and there's another thing is that just, if you go through Moshe's rayas to what he's saying, almost everything that he says doesn't prove exactly the chiddush that he said. Okay? What I mean is like this. You could take almost every one of his proofs and come to a different conclusion than what he said. And the conclusion would be is like this. And the conclusion to us sounds much more logical. The conclusion would be is that when a person buys something, when you buy milk from the guy, you have to be mevarer that this milk was milk from cow. That you have to prove that this milk came from a cow, and there's no chashash that it came from another animal. When you buy milk in a different form, like I said, cheese or butter, you buy it in a different form, that takana is over. Maybe Chazal only made the takana while it's in the milk form. Maybe when it's not in a milk form, the rice that he brings, almost every one of them could, instead of saying what Moshe said, could be saying, as long as it's in a milk form, that's what's usher. If it's not, that's what has to be proven. If it's not in milk form, then the whole takana doesn't apply at all. In which case, when I'm buying a bottle of milk, I don't have to be right. The last guy made it as milk. I have to go all the way back to the cow, which is the logic is that I should go all the way back to the cow. But if I buy it as a not milk anymore, I buy it as butter. Okay, I buy it as cheese. I buy it as, we'll see in Halacha Gimel, I buy it as powdered milk. Okay, that's the potential cooler for powdered milk. I'm buying it not in the regular milk form. Maybe in that case, that's the case when Chazal didn't make the takana. Then we can at least understand it. They said it's milk, you have to make this pure. If it's not milk anymore, maybe they wouldn't continue it on. They said once it became not milk, don't be mach anymore. But in which case, the chiddush Moshe is saying is would not be to say is that only he gave that. Then what Moshe saying wouldn't be correct. Then if I'm buying a bottle of milk and the government never went to the farmer and I don't have any beer that farmer was making it cow's milk, then it wouldn't be mutter. Yes.
I understand, and I was thinking, I didn't want to say because that's a big thing, is, so now I'm giving a hechsher on powdered milk. CRC is called the powdered hechsher milk. How can they give a hechsher to say that this is milk in order to make it powder for the consumer who doesn't have to worry about it? Isn't it my responsibility to say that milk is good?
We're not talking about powdered milk. We're going to do that in Halacha Gimel.
Or making cheese, or making anything.
This whole idea we're going to talk about in Halacha Gimel. Okay, when we get to that, it's a good question. Yes, it's a good question. We're going to talk about that. Yes. Okay, so we're left with this Ramash's big Kiddush. Okay, we have some questions of what it should be and other ways to potentially see it. I have to just tell you that Rabbi Gordimer, who from the OU, who lives in Derry, that's his, Rabbi Gordimer wrote a number of articles about this, that it can say the situation, what Ramesh was describing is not true anymore, and it could be that nowadays the government actually does go all the way back to the farms. Okay, that may go all the way back to the farms. Okay, that Kiddush may not apply. It may not need that Kiddush. Okay, so now, this Kiddush from this third Teshuvah is going to be a little of a segue into something that's really next time, but we're going to get warm up to it already this time. And that's it. Ramosha was telling people that in the United States that they could eat milk even if it wasn't with a Yid watching the milking. Okay, what we call Chalav Stam. And what we're going to want to know next time is what about getting that from other countries? In which other countries should be willing to be makel and say is you could also buy the milk as long as it's coming because of the government oversight, the government checkdown. Okay, that's really going to be for next time. But we're going to warm up to that with a discussion like this. Last summer, some of us who were here heard Rabbi Padua speak in Toronto for the Echo, and his topic was milk from India. India changed their export laws in some way that made it that there was going to be more exports of casein. Casein is a milk protein. There were going to be more exports of casein from India. So Rabbi Padua was sent by the London Bezin, that's what he works for, he was sent by the London Bezin to India to see whether they should accept milk from India. I don't think he was going to see specific plans. I don't think that was his point. But he went there just to see B'chlal, should they accept it, meaning should it qualify as Chalav Stam? Should they be willing to take casein from these companies? And he spent time in India trying to see what goes on there, and he was reporting about that to Aruch. And he found out that what he showed very vividly with lots of graphics and videos and pictures, it was very interesting, was that in India they use a system of milk collection called micro-farming. Okay, and micro-farming means is everybody's got what? They don't have little cows, no. Everybody's got 1 or 2 cows, okay? And everybody with his 1 or 2 cows, when it's time for breakfast, they milk the cow and they put it into their Cheerios. Okay, they probably don't Cheerios, but they put it into the Cheerios, and whatever's left, whatever they didn't use for the Cheerios that morning, they bring to the middle of town, to their village level center, a collection point. Okay, he said they're big into initials here. Okay, the VLC, okay, the village level center. They bring it to the can, and they dump their milk into the container. They weigh it on. They wanted. No, I don't know about that. I don't know. They have, okay, today you brought in 26 ounces, okay, you get credit for 26 ounces. Okay, every once in a while, the milk goes from the VLC to the milk collection center. That's like a regional area. That's the MCC. Okay, to the regional place they collect it from. From there, every once in a while, a truck comes to one of the MCCs and brings it to the dairy where it's processed into casein. Okay, these are not things that are going to be used as fluid milk. No one's going to be drinking this. It's turned into, they take the casein out of it, and I don't know what happens to the rest of it. Okay, so basically, there is not the slightest bit of control on the farmers coming to the village level center. Not only is it not because I don't know if they care or they don't care, but it's not physically possible to do any oversight on these people. The guys at Mama's coming in, he shows you in all their glory. I'm saying Mama's with little buckets and containers from their houses. I mean, there's no one, anybody could possibly be monitoring what's going on there. Okay, it's nothing like the farming we're used to. You know what I mean? With guys with hundreds of cows and milking stations and our merry-go-rounds that we have for milking cows, there's nothing doing. You know what I mean? It's like, this is Mama's, people coming with little pails and buckets, you know? So, I mean, you think about the kind of country it is and what they're holding, then that's not so strange. So, the London Bezin listened to what he had to say and said, listen, if that's true, there's no government oversight. There isn't a clue as to whether this stuff is cow's milk. And they said they will not take dairy products from India. They won't give hashgacha. The real question is, should they give hashgacha? And I guess the second half of that is, and therefore they won't accept products from other hashgachas, but they won't give hashgacha. Okay? So when the conference was over, we went to the OU. I asked them the question that was on everybody's mind. Okay, how come the OU does take products from India? How come they're giving hashgacha on dairy products from India? So what's going on? Don't you know this? Don't you know what's going on? Fact-wise, is he saying accurate facts? And if he is, what's going on? And they said, their answer was, what's the question? You don't even know what he told them. It's not even a question. They said, Rav Moshe's third Teshuvah says that it's mutter. Rav Moshe says, we don't care what happens at the earlier stages in the producing of the milk. All we care about is at the stage when you become involved with it. Okay, so when you become involved in it, it means at the level of the dairies. If you become involved in the level of the dairies, at the dairies, is there government oversight? Yeah, there's government oversight. So at the dairies, there's oversight to make sure that things are up to whatever standard they have to be. So at that level, there's oversight. Good enough. Who cares if 2 levels back in the farms and at the village level, maybe even the regional level, who cares if there's oversight there?
Somehow it's not penetrating.
You're not the only one who's curious. Go ahead.
When Rav Moshe wrote this Teshuvah, how was he basing his thought process? You know, if Chazal said something, there's certain times I know when you can say Chazal said it, we don't dispute it, and we use it today just the way they said it. But if you're talking about a shtat that has 20 farms, and you go to the farmer and you buy your milk, and then you're talking about an international conglomerate that has, little, whether it's little farms or major farms, whatever it is, we don't worry about what they did before. I mean, there's such thing as bittul, but that's not called bittul. That's.
I'm going to sort of address what you said in 1 second. Hold your thought, Kenny. What do you want to say, Duffin? He's gone. Okay. So this is what Moshe. So they said to us, "What's the question? What's the shaila?" What you're describing is exactly what Moshe saw in the 50s in America. Now I don't know if it was exactly the same, but the same basic idea, which is the government doesn't look at what's going on in the farms. The government in India doesn't look at the farms. If Moshe didn't care about what goes on here, he only cares about the dairy. So he said, so we don't care about dairy either. All we care about is at the dairy level, the government does have the oversight. So we're in business. Okay, that's what they said. Okay? So really, you don't have to accept their answer, but the answer was, at least it was a good answer. They were saying it's true in fact that there may not be any oversight in the farms. They say there's a little, okay, but basically, let's say there's no oversight in the farms. But it doesn't make a difference because we only have to care about the point when it's a Yid at Yisrael or when the Yid becomes involved in it, and at that point there is oversight.
What oversight is there at that point? Does it get seen in Mendachka from Kamel?
That there's no adulteration in those plans, right? In those plans, when they stand there, they say, no, make sure, don't put anything in. You should know, there's an industry of horses milk in India. Horses or camels? No, camels milk in India. There is an industry, so they make sure no mixtures are going on over there either. Okay, so they do this, whatever they do, they're making sure over there. Okay, so now, I have 3 points to say about this. The first is like this. Obviously, if you didn't agree with Rav Moshe's third Teshuvah, then you wouldn't take milk from India either. Okay, the question is it possible that you could accept milk in America, but not accept milk from India? No, could you agree with Rav Moshe? Let me say this a different way. Could we give a different answer to the person's question than Rav Moshe did, yet and be matir the milk in America, even though the government doesn't go to the farms, but not be matir the milk in India? Maybe I'm being too confused. Okay. Rav Moshe is saying is, if you want to drink milk in America, then you have to say you only care about the final stage. You don't care about the farmer. Mm-hmm. So in which case, then we have to say, okay, then we have to do it from India also. Is there a different answer? Could we have given a different answer to that person's question? The person asked the question to Rav Moshe. He said, but no one goes to the farms. Can we give a different answer to that question that would still leave the milk in America mutter, but that answer might not translate to India, but we're not translating to. And there is a very simple answer. Okay, the answer is like this. And Rav Moshe is maramis at this himself when he writes in the Teshuvah. The answer is like this. The reason why we permit milk, this is like what David was trying to say before. The reason why we permit milk in America is not because the government tells us that the milk is kosher. That's not why we matter the milk in America. Moshe didn't say that's why it's mutter. The reason why we matter it is because the government oversight provides us with an anan sahadi, we can be the edim that the milk is from cow's milk. Okay? The government oversight makes the anan sahadi. That is to say, the government's oversight on the farmer, on the dairy, gives us an Anansahadi. We would say is, the government's oversight in the dairy works with the farm. So any fear that the government puts into the dairy trickles down to the farmer. So the farmer is afraid to play games with his milk because the dairy will get back at him. The dairy won't buy from him anymore if he plays games with him. So the dairy's fear of the government translates into a non-time that even the farmer is giving us cow's milk. In other words, even if the government never walks into the farm, the fact that the government cares about what goes on in the dairy, and if the government would find things wrong in the dairy, the dairy would turn back to their farm and say, listen, Bob, why are you selling me this garbage? I don't want this. I'm getting into trouble with the government. I won't buy from you anymore. So we don't have to have the government showing up at your farm. We just have to have an Ansahadi. An Ansahadi we have, because maybe the government's control of the dairies is enough to trickle back into an Ansahadi even on the farmers. That works in America. That doesn't work with the micro farmers. That the dairy hasn't a clue that the problem that they have came from one little guy in his backyard whose kid decided to throw the Cheerios in. Okay, we have no idea that he can't trace it back to that. There's no connection between the farmer and the dairy. So there's no amount to have you back down to the farmer level because it's so far removed and it's so not traceable that it's not possible. But when you're talking about that you have a dairy that buys from 20 farms or even from 50 farms, and if they would have a problem, they're going to trace it back. The people will take that seriously enough that we could potentially have said that there's an attack all the way back. Ramesh was Maramis that he considers such a thing. He talks about how it's not such a strong thing and not such a good answer, not such a good proof to it, but maybe that was the better answer, or that was the simpler answer to the person's question. In which case, we wouldn't have had to say Ramesh's Kiddush altogether. In which case, that would make the milk mutter in America, but not yet translate to a place, a country that this type of a system. I don't mean in France. I'm talking about in India, where they work with this microfarm. You might not translate to that. Also, this is what I think Yossi was being around at before. It's like this. Ramesh in his third Teshuvah says, he talks about a little, that the part of the reason why Chazal were so lax about the stakana. Okay, listen to what he's saying. They're being lax about the stakana to say that the stakana only starts from the person who I bought it from. You don't have to care about the guys before it. Part of what went into that thinking was that really min hadin the milk is mutter. Min hadin, the chances of someone adding milk in and the amount that person would have added in are so small that doesn't make a difference. Min hadin, we don't really have to be choishes. This is what Yossi was talking about. I don't have to be choishes from the derisa level. I have to be choishes that there's milk in there, that there's straight milk in there. Even if there is, it's probably bottled. Anyhow, the possibilities are so small that with derisa I don't have to be choishes. The chachamim will use a word that you think a chumrah. Okay, they say go over and above what you're really required to do for this special din. So the chachamim decided to start that only from the person I bought it from. I can't say I really understand that, but at least it gives a little structure to what happened, which is the Chazal, they were making a big chum on people. They said only care about the person who you bought it from, don't care about more stages back. That's only true. All of that is only true if you could say that the min hadin it's really mutter. Okay? What happens if you go to a place where we have a problem whether min hadin it's even mutter? Well, we have a place in India, Rabbi Padma had plenty of statistics of how much adulteration there is in milk. Okay? How many problems they find of milk not being pure cow's milk.
Outside of America.
In India, in the same country, in India.
Did you ever find in America?
No, it's very rare, okay? But over there, he had all kinds of statistics of how bad it is. Now, it's true, those statistics were for the drinking milk for the local population, okay, the fluid milk. Those statistics were that casein, but it just shows a culture of if people were doing that in the regular drinking milk, what was seemingly they would be doing the same kind of things in this stuff which no one cares about and no one knows about it, etc. So it could be that in a country like this, even if we'll say like Ramesh said that you only have to worry about the person who you got it from. That's only true when you're buying it from a person who you're buying it from really minadin. I know the milk is cow's milk. Minadin, I could be making and everything would be fine. Just we have this special chumrah. Chazal chose to make that chumrah only at the later stage. But if on the base I don't even know that it's okay, then I have nothing to talk about. If I have a base problem, maybe the stuff is treif milk. So then on a much more, if it's a more simplistic chash, then I have to be choishish even then I have to be choishish even though the takana only started from here, I have to be choishish further back. Okay?
So how does it apply to the oil milk?
It's a good question. It's a question on them. Okay, they have a basis. They're saying, Ramesh said it over here, it'll work in India also. We're asking a question that maybe there are ways to argue that might not be true. And next time, this is going to open us up into a bigger, the bigger question, which is, how do we decide b'chlal, which countries to take from? Okay, this is a specific issue to India, that they have this micro-farming system, but we're going to open up to other countries. Just b'chlal, how do we decide whose government oversight, etc. is good enough?